In the heart of Chicago, under the twinkling lights of a rooftop restaurant, Sarah's phone rang with a message that froze her world. Her husband James knew everything about the secret dinners, about the stolen kisses with Ryan. The words on the screen were not just a warning, but a promise of retribution. Sarah's laughter faded. The pulse of the city seemed to slow down, and the game she thought was hers was out of control. What did James know, and how far would he go? Write in the comments about your guesses what will happen next. James Carter, 38, was a man who thrived on precision. A corporate lawyer in Chicago's bustling loop, he was known for his sharp intellect and unshakable composure. His office, perched on the 40th floor of a glass tower, overlooked Lake Michigan, a view that mirrored his ordered life. At home, in a sleek condo with floor-to-ceiling windows, he shared his days with Sarah, 34, an event planner whose infectious energy could light up any gala. Their life looked perfect: successful careers, a modern home, invitations to the city's elite events. But beneath the polished surface, their marriage had grown quiet, the spark dimmed by routine. James and Sarah had met a decade ago at a charity auction. She was a rising star in event planning, her laughter drawing every eye. He was the reserved lawyer who bid on a painting just to talk to her. Their early years were electric: late-night talks, weekend trips to the Michigan shore, dreams of a future together. But as James climbed the ranks at his firm, his focus shifted to depositions and deadlines. Sarah, meanwhile, craved spontaneity, the kind of life where plans could be tossed aside for a sudden adventure. Their evenings, once filled with shared stories, became brief exchanges over takeout, the silence between them growing heavier each month. Sarah's work took her to glittering venues across Chicago, art galleries in River North, rooftop bars in Wicker Park. She thrived in the chaos of organizing high-profile events, her charm disarming even the most demanding clients. But the late nights and constant socializing left her feeling unmoored, as if she were performing a role rather than living a life. James, always supportive, attended her events when he could, but his presence felt perfunctory, his mind often elsewhere. She began to wonder if he still saw her, the real her, not just the polished wife who complimented his success. At home, their condo was a study in modern elegance, with clean lines and neutral tones. Yet, it felt more like a showroom than a sanctuary. The kitchen island, where they once cooked together, now held only coffee cups and unopened mail. Their conversations were practical: schedules, bills, the occasional "how was your day?" that never dug deeper. Sarah longed for the man who used to surprise her with handwritten notes, but James seemed to have retreated into a world of logic and control, leaving her to navigate her restlessness alone. James wasn't blind to the distance growing between them. He noticed Sarah's distracted glances, the way she lingered over her phone, the excuses for staying out late. At first, he chalked it up to her demanding job. Fundraisers didn't plan themselves. But a nagging instinct, honed by years of analyzing contracts and clients, told him something was off. He didn't confront her. Instead, he observed, cataloging the small inconsistencies: a new perfume, a vague answer about a client dinner, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He told himself it was nothing, but the weight in his chest grew heavier each day. Their life wasn't all cracks. There were moments of warmth: a shared laugh at a friend's barbecue, a quiet Sunday morning with coffee and the newspaper. James still believed in their partnership, in the life they'd built. He planned to surprise Sarah with a weekend getaway, hoping to rekindle what they'd lost. But as he scrolled through travel sites one evening, Sarah's phone, left on the counter, lit up with a message: "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." The sender was Ryan. James's heart sank, but his mind sharpened. He didn't open the message. Not yet. He needed to be sure to approach this like any case, methodically, with evidence. Sarah, unaware of James's suspicions, felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Her work had introduced her to Ryan, a 30-year-old graphic designer with a quick wit and a passion for art. He was everything James wasn't: spontaneous, unpolished, present. Their conversations first about design trends, soon turned personal, stretching late into the night. She told herself it was harmless, just a friendship. But the butterflies in her stomach when Ryan smiled to her told a different story. She wasn't ready to admit what was happening, not even to herself. As James lay awake that night, staring at the city lights beyond their bedroom window, he wrestled with a choice. Confront Sarah and risk shattering their fragile balance, or dig deeper and face whatever truth was waiting. He chose the latter, his lawyer's instinct overriding his heart's ache. He began to pay closer attention, noting her schedules, her moods, the times she slipped away. He wasn't a man to act on impulse, but he was a man who won battles through preparation. Whatever was coming, he'd face it on his terms. The unease in James's chest hardened into certainty over weeks. Sarah's late nights grew frequent, her explanations flimsier. Client meeting ran long, she'd say, avoiding his eyes. A forgotten receipt from a Lincoln Park wine bar, crumpled in her coat pocket, listed 2 glasses of Pinot Noir, dated for an evening she'd claimed to be at the office. James's lawyerly mind cataloged each detail, but the pain of her distance cut deeper than he'd admit. He wasn't just losing his wife. He was losing the life he'd thought was theirs. Sarah, meanwhile, was slipping further into her secret world. Ryan's texts lit up her phone, each one a spark of excitement. Their meetings, once confined to casual coffee shops, moved to tucked-away jazz clubs in Logan Square, where the dim lights and soft music blurred the lines between friendship and something more. Ryan saw her in a way James hadn't in years, asking about her dreams, laughing at her quirks. She felt alive, not just the polished event planner, but a woman with desires she'd buried. Yet guilt gnawed at her. She'd catch James's quiet glances at dinner, his polite questions masking something heavier, and wonder if he sensed the truth. James's suspicions crystallized one evening when Sarah left her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. A notification from Ryan flashed. "Meet me at the gallery tomorrow." James hesitated, his pulse quickening. He didn't read the message, but the name burned into him. Ryan wasn't a client or a colleague. He was a threat. Instead of confronting her, James leaned on his instincts. He hired a discreet private investigator, a contact from his legal work, to track Sarah's movements. He also accessed her cloud backups through their shared account, a precaution he'd set up years ago. The evidence trickled in. Photos of Sarah and Ryan at a River North art exhibit, her car parked near his studio late at night, texts about needing to feel free. The betrayal stung, but a deeper wound came unexpectedly. Digging through old emails, James found a message from 2019, buried in Sarah's archive folder. It was a flirtatious exchange with a coworker, hinting at a brief affair during a rough patch in their marriage. Sarah had ended it, swearing to herself it would stay buried. James had never known. Now, the discovery twisted the knife. Her betrayal wasn't new, only bolder. He sat in his office, the city's lights blurring through the window, grappling with the weight of her secrets. He wasn't just a betrayed husband. He was a man who'd been blind. Sarah sensed a shift in James, though she couldn't pinpoint why. His questions grew sharper, his silences colder. At a charity gala she'd organized, he stood by her side, charming as ever, but his eyes didn't meet hers. She brushed it off, telling herself he was stressed from work. Her focus was on Ryan, on the thrill of their next meeting. They planned a quiet dinner at a small bistro in the West Loop, a place far from their usual circles. She told James she'd be working late, her lie practiced but not perfect. As she slipped into a dress that felt like rebellion, she pushed down the unease creeping up her spine. James, meanwhile, was steps ahead. The investigators' reports painted a clear picture. Sarah and Ryan were reckless, meeting in public despite their caution. James didn't need more proof, but he needed a plan. He wasn't driven by rage, though it simmered beneath his calm. He wanted answers, control, a way to reclaim his dignity. He confided in a therapist, a step he'd never considered before, admitting the humiliation that gnawed at him. The sessions helped him see his pain clearly, not just Sarah's deception, but the ways he'd let their marriage drift. He resolved to act, not out of vengeance, but to restore balance. The night of Sarah's bistro dinner, James sat in his car across the street. The investigator's photos spread on the passenger seat. He watched her laugh with Ryan through the restaurant's window, her hand brushing his. The sight burned, but he stayed composed. He typed a message, his fingers steady. I know about Ryan. In 2019. Let's talk. He hit send, knowing it would land like a grenade. Inside, Sarah's phone lit up. Her smile faltered, her face draining of color as she read the words. Ryan leaned in, confused, but she couldn't speak. James drove away, the city's hum fading behind him, his mind already on the next move. Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched her phone, James's message searing into her mind. The cozy bistro, once a haven for her and Ryan, felt like a cage. Ryan's voice, asking what was wrong, barely reached her. She reread the words, I know about Ryan. And 2019. Let's talk. The mention of 2019, a secret she'd buried deep, sent panic coursing through her. How had James found out? Whilst did he know? She stammered an excuse to Ryan, claiming a work emergency, and fled the restaurant, the Chicago night swallowing her as she hailed a cab. Back at their condo, Sarah paced the living room, the city's skyline mocking her with its indifference. She tried calling James, but his phone went to voicemail. Her mind raced, replaying every moment of her affair with Ryan, every lie she'd told. The 2019 affair, a fleeting mistake with a co-worker during a rough patch, was something she'd vowed to forget. She'd ended it quickly, convinced James would never know. Now it was a weapon in his hands. She sank onto the couch, guilt and fear warring within her, wondering if her marriage was already lost. Ryan, left alone at the bistro, was rattled. Sarah's abrupt exit and the fear in her eyes unnerved him. He texted her, asking if she was okay, but got no reply. A seed of doubt took root. Had they been too careless? He'd always been cautious, choosing out-of-the-way spots for their meetings, but the thrill of their connection had made him bold. Now he felt exposed, his carefree charm replaced by a gnawing worry. He paid the bill and left, glancing over his shoulder as if James might be watching. James, meanwhile, was in his office, the city's lights casting long shadows across his desk. He hadn't gone home after sending the message. He needed space to think. The evidence from the private investigator, photos, texts, timelines, lay organized in a folder, a case as airtight as any he'd built in court. But this wasn't about winning a trial. It was about confronting the life he'd thought he knew. His therapist's words echoed. Anger is natural, but what do you want from this? He didn't want revenge, not really. He wanted clarity, a way to move forward without losing himself. Sarah's affair with Ryan had escalated in recent weeks. Their meetings, once innocent chats over coffee, had grown intimate, filled with lingering glances and whispered promises. They met at a Logan Square jazz club, where Ryan's hand brushed hers under the table, or at a quiet gallery in Pilsen, where they pretended to discuss art. Sarah felt seen, her restlessness soothed by his attention. But each encounter deepened her guilt. She'd catch herself lying to James with ease, hating the person she was becoming, yet unable to stop. James's discovery of the 2019 affair had been a gut punch. The email, tucked in Sarah's archive folder, was brief but damning. A co-worker's suggestive words, her coy replies. It had ended quickly, but the betrayal lingered. James wondered how many other secrets she kept. He cross-referenced the investigator's reports with her old emails, building a timeline that left no room for doubt. Sarah wasn't just straying, she was rewriting their history. The realization hardened his resolve, but he refused to let it break him. The next morning, Sarah found James at the kitchen island, sipping coffee as if nothing had changed. His calm unnerved her more than anger would have. "We need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. James met her eyes, his gaze steady but unreadable. "Not yet," he replied, setting down his mug. "I have a meeting. We'll talk when I'm ready." His words were polite, controlled, but they carried a weight that made her stomach twist. She watched him leave, the door's click echoing like a verdict. Ryan, meanwhile, received an anonymous text. A screenshot of a message he'd sent Sarah, timestamped from their last meeting. No sender, no explanation, just the chilling implication that someone knew. His pulse raced. He called Sarah, demanding answers, but she was evasive, her voice strained. "I can't talk now," she said, hanging up. Ryan's confidence crumbled. He wasn't just a fling anymore. He was a target. The thought of James, a man he'd never met, but whose shadow loomed large, made him question everything. James spent the day preparing, not for a fight, but for a resolution. He consulted his lawyer, drafting divorce papers that protected his assets while leaving Sarah a fair share. He didn't want to destroy her, but he wouldn't be a victim. His therapist urged him to consider what he valued most: justice, peace, or closure. James wasn't sure yet, but he knew one thing. He'd face this on his terms, with the same precision that had defined his career. As he left his office, the city's pulse seemed to match his own, a steady beat, ready for the next move. James sat across from his therapist, the hum of Chicago's evening traffic faint beyond the window. The sessions had become a lifeline, a space to sift through the wreckage of Sarah's betrayal. "I could expose her," he said, his voice steady but laced with exhaustion. "I have proof, texts, bank transfers, even her old emails from 2019. But what's the point?" His therapist leaned in, her tone gentle but probing. "What do you need, James? Not what anger wants, what you need to move forward." The question hung in the air, forcing him to face his pain. Revenge felt hollow. He craved peace, a way to reclaim his life without losing who he was. Sarah, meanwhile, was drowning in regret. James's cryptic message at the bistro had shattered her illusions, and his silence since was unbearable. She tried texting, calling, leaving voicemails that echoed with desperation, but he didn't respond. The condo, once a symbol of their success, now felt like a tomb, every corner holding memories of lies she'd told. She cut off contact with Ryan, her guilt smothering any lingering desire. Ryan's messages turned from concern to frustration, then stopped entirely after an anonymous text. A screenshot of their plans spooked him. Alone, Sarah faced the truth. She'd broken her marriage, and there might be no fixing it. James's focus shifted to strategy. He met with his lawyer, drafting divorce papers that protected his interests while offering Sarah a fair share. His investigator had uncovered one more detail. Sarah had withdrawn small amounts from their joint account, likely for her outings with Ryan. The sums were minor, but they were leverage if negotiations turned messy. James didn't want to crush her, but he needed to ensure she faced consequences. He kept the evidence quiet, a card to play only if necessary. Sarah, desperate to salvage something, reached out to a mediator. She wrote James a letter, her words raw and unpolished. "I lost myself in our routine, and I hurt you in ways I can't take back. I'm sorry for Ryan, for 2019, for everything." She didn't expect forgiveness, but she needed to own her mistakes. James read it in his office, the city's lights blurring as he weighed her words. The letter stirred a flicker of empathy, but trust was a bridge too far. He agreed to mediation, not to reconcile, but to find clarity. Why had she strayed, and could he let go without bitterness? The mediation took place in a sterile office near the Loop, the mediator a calm professional who urged honesty over blame. Sarah went first, her voice trembling as she admitted her loneliness. "You were always working, James. I felt like a guest in our life. I should have told you, but I ran to Ryan instead. And in 2019, I made the same mistake with someone else. I hid it because I was scared." Her confession hung heavy, her eyes searching his for a reaction. James listened, his expression guarded, the pain of her words tempered by her candor. When James spoke, his tone was even deliberate. "I wasn't there enough, and I see that now. But you chose to lie, Sarah, to me, to yourself. Ryan, 2019, the money you took from our account, those were your decisions. I trusted you, and you broke that." He wasn't cruel, just honest, his words cutting because they were true. He added, "I don't want to hate you, but I don't know if I can stay." The mediator asked what they hoped for. Sarah wanted a chance to rebuild. James needed time to decide what he could live with. After the session, James grappled with his path. His therapist had challenged him to define his core: integrity, peace, strength. Ruining Sarah would betray that, but so would ignoring her actions. He took a measured step, sending Ryan a legal notice through his lawyer, citing harassment and warning against further contact. It wasn't about destruction. It was about closing that chapter. Ryan, already shaken, disappeared from Sarah's orbit, leaving her to confront her choices in solitude. Sarah sought therapy, driven by a need to understand herself. Her sessions peeled back layers of insecurity, revealing why she'd chased fleeting thrills over stability. She didn't expect James's forgiveness, but she wanted to grow. For herself, not just to win him back. She stepped back from her high-profile event planning, taking a quieter role and nonprofit. The shift felt grounding, a small act of rebuilding her fractured sense of self. James began to glimpse a future unburdened by anger. He listed their condo for sale, eyeing a simpler home in Evanston where he could start fresh. The idea of a new beginning, free from the weight of their shared past, sparked hope. He wasn't ready to forgive Sarah, but he could release the resentment that chained him to her. One evening, sorting through files, he found a note she'd written years ago, a silly promise to always steal his coffee. He smiled faintly, tucking it away, not as a tether, but as a reminder that he could heal. James stood in the condo's empty living room, the Chicago skyline sprawling beyond the windows. The furniture was gone, the walls bare, the space echoing with the life he and Sarah had once shared. He'd finalized the sale, ready to move to a quieter home in Evanston. The divorce papers, signed after weeks of mediation, sat in a folder on the counter. A fair split, no vengeance, just closure. He'd chosen peace over punishment, a decision that felt like reclaiming his strength. As he locked the door for the last time, he felt a weight lift, the city's pulse urging him toward a new beginning. Sarah, grappling with her new reality, sat in her therapist's office, a small space in Lincoln Park. She'd taken a job at a community arts center, trading glitzy galas for meaningful work. Her sessions forced her to confront her choices: Ryan, the 2019 affair, the lies she'd spun. "I chased what felt good," she admitted, "but I hurt the one person who mattered most." Her therapist pushed her to define her values, and Sarah clung to honesty, vowing to rebuild herself. She wrote James a final letter, not sent but kept as a promise. "I'll live better, for me and for the trust one broke." The mediation had been their last real conversation. Sarah had hoped for a miracle, a chance to start over. But James's words were clear: "I can't rebuild what's gone, but I wish you well." His calm wasn't cold, just resolute, a man who'd fought for his truth and won. Sarah left the session in tears, not from anger, but from acceptance. She'd lost him, not because he'd struck back, but because her actions had severed their bond. The fairness of his terms, half the condo's proceeds, no public scandal, stung more than any punishment could. Ryan, spooked by the legal notice James had sent, vanished from Chicago's art scene. Rumors swirled that he'd moved to Seattle, chasing new projects and a fresh start. Sarah didn't miss him. Their connection, once electric, now felt like a mirage. She saw it for what it was, a fleeting escape from her own discontent. Her therapy helped her trace the roots of her restlessness, back to a marriage that had grown stale and her fear of confronting it. She didn't blame James, not anymore. She blamed her silence. James, settling into his Evanston home, found unexpected calm. The house was modest, with a small garden he tended on weekends, a far cry from the condo's sterile elegance. He took on pro bono cases at his firm, helping families navigate legal battles. The work grounded him, a reminder that his skills could build, not just defend. One evening, sorting through a box, he found a photo of him and Sarah at a lakeside picnic, her smile wide, his arm around her. He didn't keep it out of longing, but as a marker of growth. He'd loved, lost, and learned to let go. Sarah's new life wasn't easy, but it was honest. She volunteered at the Arts Center, teaching kids to paint, their laughter a balm for her guilt. She started journaling, filling pages with reflections on trust and second chances. One night, she attended a lecture on forgiveness, scribbling notes about self-repair. She didn't expect to erase her mistakes, but she could live in a way that honored the lessons they'd taught her. She thought of James often, hoping he'd found the peace she was chasing. Their story rippled quietly through their circles. Friends who'd known them as a power couple were surprised by the divorce, but admired James's restraint. Sarah's colleagues noticed her shift, less flash, more substance, and respected her for it. Neither spoke ill of the other. Their silence was a mutual truce. The city, indifferent to their drama, pulsed on, its lights a backdrop to countless other lives unfolding. James, walking along Evanston's lakefront one crisp morning, felt the first stirrings of hope. He wasn't whole yet, but he was healing. His therapist's question, "What do you need?" had an answer now: to live with integrity, to build a life that reflected his values. He didn't hate Sarah. He wished her growth, the same as he sought for himself. As he watched the waves lap the shore, he knew this wasn't the end, but a beginning, one he'd shape with the clarity he'd earned. Sarah, across the city, sat in her small apartment, a canvas on her easel. She painted for herself now, not for praise, each stroke a step toward redemption. She'd lost James, but she'd found a flicker of who she could be, flawed, yes, but striving. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she walked it with honesty. Chicago's skyline glowed in the distance, a reminder that even broken things could find new light.